The stranger in the shadows, the small diner on the edge of the city, had long lost its shine. The neon sign outside flickered every few seconds, buzzing like a tired whisper in the night. Inside, the place smelled of burnt toast, cheap coffee, and old memories. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was where Tommy always came. Every Thursday evening for the last 6 years, he would sit in the back corner booth, sip the same black coffee, and stare out the window at a world that seemed to move on without him. Tommy was a veteran. He had served 2 tours overseas, returned, with medals, scars, and memories he didn't talk about. He was quiet, respectful, always paid in cash, and left generous tips. He didn't need much, just peace and a bit of routine to keep the noise in his head at bay. Yet even in this quiet sanctuary, something had changed. He felt eyes watching him. For the past few weeks, every time he glanced at the reflection in the diner window, he saw someone sitting alone in the farthest booth, hidden beneath a black cap, always arriving after him and leaving minutes before. Never ordering much, never speaking to anyone, but always watching. At first, Tommy thought he was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a traveler, someone who happened to come at the same time. But the pattern continued. Same booth, same silence, same eyes. His instincts, honed from years of surviving both war and life back home, were never wrong. Someone was watching. But why? One rainy night, with thunder rolling in the distance and the streets wet with fresh memories, Tommy had enough. He waited. He didn't leave after his coffee. He stayed longer, watching the stranger instead. When the man finally got up to leave, Tommy stood too. His steps were quiet but firm. He followed the stranger out the door, down the street and across to a dim alley between 2 buildings. The stranger stopped. He didn't turn, just stood there, as if waiting. "You've been following me," Tommy said, his voice low but steady. There was silence for a moment, and then the stranger finally turned. The streetlight flickered, and for a second, Tommy's breath caught in his throat. He knew that face. Everyone did. It was Keanu Reeves. But Keanu didn't speak immediately. He looked almost embarrassed, like a child caught sneaking a cookie. His hands were in his jacket pockets, and he shifted on his feet before finally saying, "I didn't mean to scare you. I needed to be sure." Tommy stared at him, confused and cautious. "Sure of what?" Keanu stepped forward, his voice soft. "Sure that it was really you." Tommy narrowed his eyes. "You know me?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Years, ago in Syria. There was a mission. My cousin was embedded with a media crew. They got ambushed. Someone pulled him out. He was wounded, bleeding, but alive. We didn't know who helped him until later. He told us. It was a soldier named Tommy. Just Tommy. No last name. We tried to find you, but..." He trailed off, his eyes searching Tommy's face as if looking for the ghost of a man from a battlefield memory. Tommy blinked, stunned. He remembered the mission. It was chaos. Bullets flying, smoke everywhere. He barely remembered the man he pulled out, only that he was unconscious and heavy. Tommy had dragged him through dirt and fire until the chopper arrived. He hadn't expected anyone to even know his name, much less search for him years later. "You're saying your cousin was that journalist?" Tommy asked, still unsure if he was dreaming. "His name is Daniel Reeves," Keanu said. "He's alive because of you." Tommy took a slow breath. The rain fell harder now, but neither of them moved. The sound filled the silence between 2 men standing in the middle of a story neither expected to be part of. Keanu stepped closer. "I came to say thank you, but when I saw you here, quiet, alone, I felt like just saying thanks wouldn't be enough." Tommy shook his head. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because he needed help." Keanu nodded. "I know. That's why I wanted to help you now." "I don't need help," Tommy replied sharply, his voice tinged with pride. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Keanu said gently. "Even the ones who pretend they don't." Tommy didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away into the rain, his boots splashing against the cold pavement. Keanu didn't follow. He just watched, his hands still in his pockets, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. The next morning, Tommy returned to the diner. The same seat, same coffee, same silence. But tucked under his mug was an envelope. No name. No note. Just a hotel keycard, a room number, and a handwritten line. Please, just meet me once. That's all I ask. K. He held the envelope for a long time, staring at the keycard like it was some kind of test. He didn't like being followed. He didn't like surprises, but something about the look in Keanu's eyes last night had stayed with him. Haunted, humble, familiar. He slid the envelope into his jacket pocket and sipped his coffee, trying to convince himself to throw it away. But deep down, he already knew he wouldn't. That evening, against every part of his better judgment, Tommy stood in front of the hotel door with the number written on that card. His hand hovered over the doorknob. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound louder than it should. He knocked once, then twice. The door opened. Keanu was there, standing barefoot in jeans and a soft sweater, holding a photo in his hand. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "I want to show you something." He handed Tommy the photo. It was old, faded. Daniel Reeves, younger, smiling weakly from a hospital bed, his arm in a sling, with a folded American flag at his side. And standing beside the bed was Tommy. No smile, just tired eyes and mud-covered uniform. Tommy didn't even remember the photo being taken. "He said you disappeared after that." Keanu continued. "No ceremony, no press, just gone." "I didn't want any of that," Tommy replied. "Why?" Tommy didn't answer right away. He just stared at the photo, feeling old wounds open like they always did when the past came knocking. Finally, he said quietly, "Because some of us made it back, and some didn't. I didn't want to stand in front of cameras while others couldn't stand at all." Keanu nodded slowly, his respect deepening. Then he walked over to the desk and opened a leather folder. Inside were documents, photos, and a small blue booklet. "This is what I wanted to talk to you about," he said. "I want to help, not with charity, with purpose. I've been working with a foundation. We're opening a center for veterans, housing, therapy, jobs, dignity. But we need someone like you, someone who's lived it." Tommy looked at him, the weight of disbelief settling on his shoulders. "Why me?" Keanu looked him in the eye. "Because you never asked for anything. And those are the people who deserve the most." The room fell into silence again, but this time it was filled with something different. Possibility. Tommy stared at the papers, then at Keanu, then down at the photo still in his hands. He didn't know what to say. His heart felt like it was fighting between fear and hope, both pounding equally loud. Before he could speak, Keanu added one more thing. "There's something else, something your actions years ago put in motion, and you deserve to know the truth." He opened a drawer, pulled out a letter, and handed it to Tommy. "Read this," he said, "and then you'll understand why your life is about to change, forever." Tommy unfolded the letter, his hands trembling slightly, unaware that what was written inside would not only shake the foundation of everything he thought he knew, but reveal a truth he was never prepared for. The letter that opened. Old wounds. Tommy sat in the quiet hotel room, holding the letter as if it were a live grenade. The paper felt too thin for something so heavy. He looked at Keanu, whose face was unreadable now, like he was both there and somewhere far away, carrying the weight of stories that couldn't yet be told. Tommy's fingers traced the crease of the envelope for a long moment, before he finally unfolded the sheet. The handwriting was neat, almost delicate, like the words were chosen carefully, not just to inform but to honor. "Dear Tommy," it began, "if you're reading this, it means Keanu found you. And that's already a miracle. I'm writing this from a place of peace, something I never thought I'd have again after that day in Syria. You pulled me out of fire and fury, carried me like I was your own blood, and you never once asked for credit. I don't know how to thank you for that, but I want you to know, you saved more than just me that day." Tommy's eyes froze on the sentence. He read it again, slowly. His chest tightened. "You saved my unborn daughter." His hands trembled slightly as he kept reading, the words now hitting harder with every line. "I didn't know it at the time, but my wife had just found out she was pregnant. We hadn't even celebrated yet. I was going to call her after that mission. I never got the chance. If you hadn't dragged me out of that wreckage, she would have been raising a child alone. And that child? She's 12 now. Her name is Lily. She knows about you. She knows that her father lives because a soldier named Tommy didn't give up." The room felt smaller suddenly. Not claustrophobic, but dense, thick with memory and meaning. Keanu didn't speak. He just watched Tommy's reaction in silence, like he knew that no word could carry the weight of what that letter held. Tommy sat still, letting the emotions roll through him like waves that had waited too long to crash. He continued reading. "After I recovered, I tried to find you. Everywhere I went, there were only dead ends, no records, just whispers. It was like you had vanished on purpose, but I understand now. You weren't hiding, you were healing, and I respect that. But I want you to know this. Every good thing I've done since that day, every award, every speech, every moment with my daughter, they all began with you. You gave me back my life, Tommy, and now, it's time someone gave something back to you." Tommy folded the letter slowly, his hand stiff like every word had turned to stone and settled in his joints. He stared out the window. The lights of the city twinkled like distant stars, far away and indifferent to the wars men fought within their souls. He felt something hot slide down his cheek and wiped it away quickly, ashamed of the tear even though no one would have blamed him for it. Keanu stood and poured 2 glasses of water. No whiskey, no drama, just simple water. He handed one to Tommy, who took it with a nod of thanks. "I didn't know he had a daughter," Tommy said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "He said she talks about you all the time." Keanu replied, "You're like a superhero in her stories." Tommy gave a short laugh, but it was hollow, cracked at the edges. "I don't feel like one." Keanu didn't try to argue. He just sat down across from him and let the silence breathe. After a few minutes, Tommy leaned forward. "What is this center you're talking about?" Keanu's eyes lit up, not in a flashy way, but with quiet passion. "We call it the second mission. It's a place for veterans to land safely after the war ends. Too many come home to silence, to broken systems, to empty houses. This place will offer housing, mental health support, job placement, even workshops to teach skills, coding, carpentry, whatever they want. It's built on the idea that coming home shouldn't be the end of the story. It should be the beginning of a new one." Tommy studied him, trying to reconcile the man from the movies with the one sitting across from him now, talking about pain and healing like he'd lived it himself. There was no ego in Keanu's words, no performance, just truth, raw and honest. "And you want me to—" "What?" Tommy asked. "To lead it," Keanu replied. "Or at least guide it. Be the voice inside that tells us what really matters. We've got people with money. We've got builders and therapists, but we don't have someone who's walked the road. You'd be the heart of it." Tommy leaned back in his chair. "I'm not a leader. I don't even talk much." "That's what makes you perfect," Keanu said softly. "People who talk too much usually don't listen, but you've been listening your whole life." Tommy looked down at his hands, calloused, aged, scarred. He had carried men with these hands, built shelters, dug trenches, held memories that refused to fade. And now someone was asking him to use them again. Not to fight, but to rebuild. To give others what he never had himself. The idea scared him more than war ever did. Keanu sensed the hesitation. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small wooden box. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward Tommy. "Open it," he said. Tommy did. Inside was a key. Simple, old-fashioned, brass. Attached to it was a dog tag. Not his, someone else's. The name was faded. That was my cousin's roommate. He didn't make it, Keanu explained. They recovered that key from his belongings. He had told my cousin that if he ever made it out, he wanted to open a place where soldiers could rest. That key, it was for a cabin he built, but never finished. We found it. It's in Montana. We're starting there. Tommy traced the edge of the key, his fingers shaking again. Everything in his life had been about survival. But this was about something else entirely. Legacy, redemption, meaning. You don't have to decide now, Keanu said gently. Just think about it. And if you say no, that's okay. But if you say yes, everything changes. Tommy didn't sleep that night. He walked the city streets feeling like a ghost passing through a world too fast for him. His thoughts spun in slow, painful circles. The war, the memories, the noise in his head that never fully stopped. But for the first time in years, he also felt something else. Possibility. By morning, he found himself outside a small park. Children were laughing. People were walking dogs, and he saw a woman sitting on a bench reading a book to a little girl with dark hair and a curious smile. He knew without asking. It was her, Lily. He stood there, frozen, as if fate itself had arranged this meeting. The woman looked up, noticed him, and for a moment their eyes met. She smiled politely. Tommy nodded back and began to turn away. But the little girl suddenly pointed and shouted, "Mommy, that's him." The woman looked confused. "Who, baby?" "The soldier, the one from the photo in Daddy's book." Tommy stopped dead in his tracks. The woman stood, eyes wide. Are you Tommy?" He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, slowly. She stepped forward, tears already welling. "I'm Sarah, Daniel's wife, and this is Lily." The little girl ran up and hugged his leg before he could react. Tommy froze, caught in a moment that felt bigger than anything he had ever trained for, and that was when he knew. He would say yes. But what he didn't know yet was that by doing so, he would uncover a secret buried in the past, a betrayal, a sacrifice, and a truth that would make him question everything about the war, about loyalty, and about the reason he was still alive. The scars we carry in silence, the cabin in Montana was nothing like Tommy expected. It wasn't just a shell of an old dream. It was a place caught between memory and resurrection. The trees surrounding it stood tall like ancient guards, their roots buried deep in soil that had seen war veterans, wild animals, and probably more secrets than Tommy was ready for. The path leading up to it was rough, uneven, scattered with broken branches and faded footprints from years ago. But still, the air had something different, something clean. It wasn't just the oxygen. It was the possibility of healing. Keanu had already been there for 2 days working with a small team of local carpenters and volunteers. They weren't building skyscrapers. They were restoring dignity piece by piece. A window replaced, a fireplace repaired, old war photos donated by veterans now framed inside. Every detail had a purpose, and when Tommy finally stepped out of the pickup truck, dust clinging to his boots, he paused for a long time before going inside. His fingers touched the edge of the wooden frame on the door. It felt solid, grounded, like something that wouldn't vanish on him. "You came?" Keanu said from behind, wiping sweat from his brow, wearing work gloves and jeans that had seen better days. "I said I would," Tommy replied. They shook hands, no fanfare, no speeches. Just quiet understanding between two men who had nothing to prove to each other. The inside of the cabin was even more telling. The walls weren't just timber, they were stories. Framed letters, old uniforms, photos of soldiers hugging their kids, laughing over campfires, some even crying in quiet corners. There was a board in the hallway labeled "Memories We Left Behind." Veterans had been mailing in pieces of their stories, and Keanu's team had pinned them up with care. Some were typed, some handwritten. A few came with bullet casings, medals, and even dog tags. Tommy walked over and read one of the notes. It was written by a man named Calvin, a former medic. Saved 10. I lost 20. Every night I wonder if I could have done more. This place might help me stop counting. Tommy didn't realize how tight his fists were until Keanu gently placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to carry all of it alone anymore. But that was the thing, wasn't it? Tommy wasn't sure he knew how to put any of it down. The weight had become part of him, like an invisible pack he carried full of names, regrets, and unfinished goodbyes. Yet something in him wanted to try. Not for himself, maybe, but for people like Calvin and for Daniel, and for that little girl who had hugged him like he was something more than a shadow in someone else's story. Over the next few days, Tommy threw himself into the work. Not the loud kind of labor that people notice and clap for, but the quiet, steady kind. He helped set up the library section, just a few shelves now, but filled with donated books, war memoirs, journals, even comic books for younger vets. He built benches out back near the creek, where someone could sit and talk or not talk at all. He joined late-night discussions by the campfire, where men and women with broken backs and broken hearts talked about nightmares they couldn't forget, and friendships they'd give anything to feel again. And during one of those nights, as the fire crackled and the stars stood still above them, a young man named Julio, only 27, but with eyes far older, turned to Tommy and asked something that made the whole circle go silent. How do you stop hating yourself for surviving? No one spoke for a while. Even the fire seemed to quiet down. Tommy stared into the flames, the question burning deeper than the logs. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost unsure. Haven't, he admitted, but maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the point isn't to stop hating. Maybe the point is to learn to live. In spite of it, to turn it into something that helps someone else. That's what this place is for. Julio nodded slowly, a tear sliding down his cheek that he didn't bother hiding. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and simply whispered, "Thank you." That night, Tommy sat outside long after the others had gone to sleep. Keanu joined him with 2 cups of black coffee. They didn't speak for a while. The stars said enough. Then Keanu said, "You were meant to be here, Tommy." Tommy shook his head lightly. "I still don't understand why you chose me." "Because you remind me of someone," Keanu replied. "Who?" "Me." The answer hung in the air like smoke. Tommy turned to him, surprised. "You've never been to war." "Not that kind," Keanu said, his voice filled with something quieter and deeper. "But everyone has a war. Mine just looked different. I've lost people, felt helpless, carried guilt, smiled in rooms where I was dying inside. The only difference is people assumed I was okay because I was famous." Tommy studied him. This man who had billions of fans, who could have spent his life on movie sets and red carpets, now sat beside him in the cold with coffee and memories. "I guess pain's the one thing that doesn't care about status," Tommy muttered. Keanu smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's why we build places like this. Because everyone deserves somewhere to put the pain down, even if just for a little while. Just when it seemed like things were starting to settle, like the pieces were finally fitting into place, the past came knocking. It was the 4th night. The volunteers had all gone to sleep. Keanu was in town attending a fundraiser. Tommy was cataloging supplies in the storeroom when he heard tires crunch against the gravel outside. Not loud. Slow. Deliberate, he stepped outside, wiping his hands on his jeans, and saw a black SUV parked under the trees. A tall man in a formal coat stepped out. His face was familiar, but Tommy couldn't place it. "You're Tommy?" the man asked. "Depends who's asking." "Colonel Matthew Breen, Intelligence Division." "Retired," the man said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick folder, sealed and stamped. He handed it over without another word. Tommy took it reluctantly. "What's this?" "A report. Declassified just last week. Has to do with the ambush in Syria. The one where you saved Daniel Reeves." The mention of that day made Tommy's jaw tighten. Why bring it now? The colonel's face was hard, unreadable. Because someone wanted that mission to fail, and it wasn't the enemy. A chill ran through Tommy's spine. He opened the folder slowly, his hands shaking again. Inside were maps, communications, logs, intercepted orders, and a single page stamped with red ink. Classified contact identified. American asset compromised. At the bottom was a name he hadn't heard in years. A name that shouldn't have been on any of those documents. His own. The betrayal buried in silence. Tommy sat in the workshop long after the colonel had driven off into the darkness. The folder, still open on the table in front of him. The paper beneath his hands felt like it was burning, like every word written there was turning to ash inside his mind. The logs, maps, and reports laid bare something he had never imagined. His name listed not just as a soldier present during the ambush, but as a classified contact, an informant, a traitor, someone who had supposedly leaked mission coordinates. None of it made sense. He had been the one dragging Daniel out of hell, not sending him into it. He had lost 3 friends that day, men who had trusted him with their lives. The thought that anyone would believe he had anything to do with their deaths twisted his stomach until he felt sick. But the documents were real. The seal, the signatures. Everything was official. And someone had made it look like he had been the one who betrayed them. He paced the room like a man trapped in a burning house, unable to find the door. The wind outside howled against the trees, branches slapping against the roof like ghostly fingers trying to claw their way in. Inside his chest, his heartbeat thundered louder than the wind. Years of silence. Years of living with guilt, nightmares, and the smell of smoke that never fully left his nose. And now this. Now this weight added on top of it all. By morning, the sun broke through the trees, golden and quiet, pretending nothing had happened. Volunteers returned to the site laughing, working, telling stories around the fire pit. Tommy forced himself to show up. He stacked wood, repaired a window frame, answered questions. But his mind was somewhere else, circling the betrayal like a wolf sniffing out a trap. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not Keanu, not Julio, not even Calvin, who had started opening up to him about things he couldn't tell his own family. Tommy carried it alone. He always did. That afternoon, Keanu returned from town. He stepped out of the truck with a quiet smile, handing off supplies to the kitchen team before finding Tommy by the creek bench. "You all right?" he asked, picking up on the shift in Tommy's energy like a tuning fork detecting a vibration, too low for others to hear. "Just tired," Tommy muttered. Keanu sat beside him. "You've got that look, the one people wear when something heavy's sitting on their chest." Tommy gave a bitter smile. "You know that look well?" "I wore it for 10 years straight." Tommy stared at the water, its surface glassy and still, reflecting the clouds. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the folder. He handed it over without a word. Keanu took it carefully, flipping through the contents with growing concern. By the time he reached the marked page, he looked up, stunned. "They accused you of leaking the mission?" "Looks like it," Tommy replied flatly. "But that's—" Keanu stopped himself, searching for the right word. "Insanity." "No," Tommy said quietly. "It's calculated. Someone put my name there, and they buried it deep. These files just got declassified last week, and even now they weren't supposed to reach me." Keanu rubbed his jaw, deep in thought. "Why now?" "Because someone knows I'm not hiding anymore," Tommy answered. "They're afraid of what I might remember, or find." Keanu handed the folder back slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out who wrote that lie," Tommy said, "and I'm going to make them tell the truth." The next day, Tommy made calls he hadn't thought he'd ever make again. Old numbers, former squad mates, distant contacts in Washington. Most didn't answer. One did. Sergeant Major Louis Brandt. They had served together for years, shared foxholes and gunfire, then lost touch after the second deployment. Brandt's voice on the other end was gravel wrapped in tension. "Tommy?" he said, surprised. "You're still breathing?" "Barely," Tommy replied. "I need to talk." In person. Where? Tommy gave the name of a diner outside Helena. Neutral ground. When he got there, Brant was already seated, his posture rigid like he'd never left active. Duty. His eyes scanned the room before settling on Tommy, who sat down with the same cautious energy. It's been a long time, Brant said. Too long, Tommy agreed. You look like a man carrying a ghost. Maybe more than one. Brant nodded, slowly. I heard rumors about Syria. About you? You ever believe them? Tommy asked. Brant stared into his coffee cup. No, but I didn't fight them either. Didn't know how. Tommy slid the folder across the table. Brant opened it, scanned the page, and his hand froze. This came from high up, he said. This wasn't written by someone in the field. Someone wanted this manufactured. You know who? Brant hesitated, then looked around to make sure no one was listening. Colonel Mitch Renner. The name hit Tommy like a slap. Renner had been in charge of operational logistics during their deployment. He was strict, respected, but had a reputation for keeping secrets. Secrets that didn't always line up with official reports. He's the one who briefed us before Syria, Tommy said. He knew every coordinate, every movement. Brant nodded. And he went private right after the mission failed. Disappeared into a defense contracting firm. No questions asked. He sold us out, Tommy whispered. He sold me out. That night, back at the cabin, Tommy didn't sleep. He sat by the fire pit long after the flames had died, staring at the embers. His mind raced, but his heart stayed calm in a strange, unnerving way, like it had been preparing for this confrontation without his knowledge. He had lived in silence for so long that facing the truth now felt more like justice than fear. Keanu found him there just before dawn, a coat draped over his shoulders, a cup of hot coffee in hand. You going after him? He asked. I have to, Tommy said. Not just for me. For everyone who died thinking I was a traitor. Keanu nodded. You're not going alone. Keanu, don't argue, he interrupted. I've got friends in places that might help us find Renner, and you're not carrying this weight by yourself anymore. Tommy looked at him, eyes filled with something deep and rare. Trust. Something he hadn't given freely in years. All right, he said quietly. Let's bring the truth into the light. But neither of them could have known that the path ahead wouldn't just lead to a disgraced colonel hiding behind corporate walls. No. What waited for them was far darker. A secret program. A list of soldiers marked for silence. And a plan that went far beyond Syria, one that still threatened lives to this day. The truth they tried to bury. The road to Washington felt like a return to a battlefield, except this time there were no bullets, only questions, buried lies, and people in suits who smiled too easily and spoke too little. Keanu and Tommy drove. Through the mountain passes, past rivers and ghost towns and open land where the sky seemed to lean in and listen. They didn't speak much, but when they did, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about what happens when the very people you swore to protect turn around and erase your name from the pages of honor, rewriting it in ink that stains like betrayal. Tommy wasn't after headlines. He wasn't interested in cameras or pity or courtroom drama. He just wanted the truth, on paper, on record, and out of the shadows. And he wanted one name to face him. Colonel Mitch Renner, the man who had sent men to die and then buried the truth like a spent shell casing in a forgotten desert. Keanu, as promised, had made a few calls. Powerful ones. People who owed him favors. Producers, former military consultants, even a senator, whose brother had once served under Tommy's command and had written letters about his courage. With their help, they secured a meeting with someone inside a quiet branch of internal investigations. Someone who could pull files the public would never see. Her name was Evelyn Park, 30 years in intelligence. Steel gray hair, sharp eyes, and a voice that didn't ask for attention but got it anyway. She met them in a secured room in a building with no sign on the door, no windows, and no clocks on the walls. She didn't shake hands. She didn't smile. She simply opened a folder and slid it across the table to Tommy. "You're not the first soldier whose name Renner tried to erase," she said, her tone flat, like she had said these kinds of things 100 times before. "But you might be the first who came back with proof." Tommy opened the folder slowly. The contents made his stomach turn. A list, handwritten, titled Project Remnant. Names of soldiers marked as unreliable, unstable, or expendable. Reasons included operational liability, excessive field compassion, and in Tommy's case, tendency toward disobedient rescue behavior. Beside his name, the code Alpha Eclipse 7. "What is this?" Tommy asked, his voice hollow. "A ghost program," Evelyn explained. "Post-mission analysis files. They identified individuals who they believed wouldn't fall in line with future strategic partnerships, especially those with foreign private interests." "Private interests?" Keanu echoed, confused. Evelyn's lips pressed together. Renner wasn't just in charge of logistics. He was working under an undisclosed contract with a multinational weapons developer. They were testing new tech during that mission: drones, AI targeting systems, autonomous recon. Daniel Reeves' crew wasn't supposed to see it. But when the ambush happened, the footage got out. Tommy pulling him out wasn't the problem. It was what Daniel recorded before going unconscious. Someone panicked. Someone gave an order to scrub it all. Tommy felt cold. "So I was labeled a threat because I saved someone?" Evelyn nodded. "You disrupted their cover story, and instead of admitting it, they erased you. Your records, your clearance level, even parts of your medical discharge file were redacted." Keanu leaned forward. "And Renner?" "He's protected," she said bitterly. "Works under shell companies now. Defense consulting, private security firms. He trains foreign units with American tech. Officially, he's retired. Unofficially, he's been untouchable." "Until now," Tommy said. Evelyn studied him. "Are you ready for what this will cost? If you go after him publicly, it won't be just him. Others will come for you, reputation, career, maybe worse. And the ones who've buried this will do anything to keep it buried." Tommy stared down at the file, at the list of names. Half of them were marked deceased. He saw familiar faces. Old squad mates. Friends. Men who had left the battlefield only to be swallowed up by silence, suicide, or mysterious accidents. He realized with growing dread that this wasn't just about Syria. This was a pattern, and he had survived it by accident. "I'm not doing this for me," he said finally. "I'm doing it for them." That night, back in the modest hotel Keanu had booked under an alias, Tommy sat by the window while Keanu scrolled through encrypted files on a laptop provided by Evelyn's team. Images flashed across the screen. Satellite footage, blacked-out pages, snippets of intercepted communications. A pattern was forming, and it pointed to one conclusion. Renner had not acted alone. Keanu turned the screen to Tommy. "Look at this. Project Remnant wasn't about protecting American lives. It was about testing weapons in live combat. They needed chaos. They needed targets. Your team was the control group." Tommy's fists clenched. "He used us like lab rats." Keanu's voice dropped lower. "There's more. Daniel's footage, the one he took before blacking out? It still exists. It was copied to an underground server. A journalist in Berlin has it. She's been trying to get it verified for years." Tommy looked at him, his pulse quickening. "You think she'll give it to us?" "She might," Keanu said, "if she knows the man in the footage is alive." Plans shifted overnight. The next morning, they boarded a flight to Germany under the names provided by Evelyn's contact. Fake passports, no press, no phones. The stakes had changed. They were no longer just chasing a corrupt officer. They were chasing the evidence that could burn an entire program to the ground. Berlin welcomed them with rain and gray skies that matched the weight in their chests. The journalist, Mila Kessler, met them in a bookstore basement she used as a safe house. She was in her 30s, sharp, unflinching, and already had a backup escape plan for the meeting in case things went wrong. When Tommy confirmed his identity, She stared at him like she had seen a ghost. "You're real," she said. "I thought they killed you." He nodded. "They tried." She led them to a small desk where a hard drive sat beside an encrypted laptop. "I don't show this to anyone. I've been followed, threatened. But if you really are who you say you are, then the world needs to see this." The video began to play, grainy at first, but then clear. Sounds of gunfire, smoke, a camera shaking as Daniel Reeves tried to crawl behind a broken wall. In the background, shapes moved. Not enemy combatants, but drones. Hovering, scanning, firing without warning. And then, an explosion. Daniel went down. The screen went black for a second. Then it showed something else. Tommy, dragging him across the rubble, taking a bullet to the shoulder and still pulling him toward a rescue chopper. And in the sky above them, an American drone, firing at a building that had already been cleared. The video ended. Mila looked at them. "Your government has denied this footage exists. They claim Daniel died in that blast. When he reappeared 6 months later, they tried to discredit his reporting. Said he made it all up. But you had the footage," Keanu said. "And no one to verify it," Mila replied. "Until now." Tommy looked at the frozen screen. Eddie, his younger self bleeding, dragging a man to safety, while death rained down from his own country's drone. He wasn't just clearing his name anymore. He was exposing the lie that had killed countless others, and for that, there would be consequences. Mila burned 3 encrypted copies, one for international media, one for her legal team, and one she handed directly to Tommy. "If anything happens to me," she said, "make sure this gets out." Tommy took the drive, his hand steady now. He had spent years running from ghosts, trying to find peace in silence. But now he had a voice, and he was going to use it, not just for himself, but for every name they had tried to erase. What he didn't know yet was that someone was already watching. A man sitting in a black room, watching that same footage on another screen, Renner, and he was preparing his next move. The voice that shook the silence. The plane touched down just before dawn. The sky over Washington was a bruised shade of blue, the kind of morning where the light didn't rise. It crept. Tommy stared out the window, the flash of city lights reflected in his tired eyes. Next to him, Keanu sat with his arms crossed, quiet, focused. Neither of them had spoken much since leaving Berlin. They didn't need to. Both men knew the storm they were flying into would change everything. Not just for them, but for anyone who had ever been forgotten, misjudged, or silenced. They arrived at the safe house arranged by Evelyn Park, a quiet brownstone hidden behind ivy and iron gates surrounded by a neighborhood that looked too peaceful for what was about to unfold. Mila's footage had already been encrypted and uploaded to 3 secure networks. The countdown had begun. Tommy would speak publicly in less than 24 hours. The press had been tipped off. Human rights organizations were ready. But before the world could hear his story, Tommy had one last thing to do. He had to face Mitch Renner. Keanu and Tommy drove to the outskirts of D.C., where Renner's private security firm was headquartered behind layers of metal, surveillance, and money. It was a fortress built on secrets. But Evelyn had cleared a meeting, official, scheduled, unannounced to Renner himself. She had called in a final favor, one that would get Tommy through the gates under the guise of a routine personnel review. Inside, under marble floors and glass elevators, Tommy walked with steady steps toward a conference room at the end of a long corridor. Renner sat at the table already, sharp suit, trimmed hair, and that same cold calm he had always worn like armor. He looked up and the surprise on his face didn't show in his voice. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "the dead man walks." Tommy closed the door behind him, his jaw locked, hands calm, heart loud. "You know why I'm here?" Tommy said. Renner smiled faintly like a chess master seeing a familiar move. "If it's about Syria, I'm afraid that ship has sailed. The files were reviewed. The conclusions were clear." "They were forged," Tommy shot back. "I've seen the original logs, the drone orders, Project Remnant. Renner's eyes darkened slightly, but he didn't blink. You think anyone's going to care about old field data? People don't want truth, they want comfort, and they trust the uniforms that give it to them. Not anymore, Tommy said. Not when they see the footage. For the first time, Renner's smile vanished. You have it. We have it, Tommy corrected. And tomorrow morning, so will the world. Renner stood slowly, his voice a little colder now. You're making a mistake. You're opening a door that won't close. These things were buried for a reason. Because they were wrong, Tommy said. Because you buried people with them. There was a long silence between them, filled only by the hum of artificial light. You won't survive this, Renner said, almost with a touch of sorrow. They'll come after you. Your name, your record, everything you ever loved. Tommy stared him down. They already took my piece, they're not taking the truth. He turned and walked out, leaving Renner standing alone in a room that suddenly felt smaller than it used to be. Back at the safe house, Keanu had already arranged the press release. News stations across the country were preparing to stream the exclusive. Social media activists had been given embargoed previews. Tommy's speech had been quietly leaked to veteran networks, survivor forums, and advocacy groups. Everyone who had once believed they were alone now had something to gather around. And then the moment came. The press room was filled with quiet tension. Rows of reporters. Camera lights glowing like stars. Tommy walked in. No uniform. Just a plain jacket and jeans, no podium, no teleprompter, just his voice. He stepped up to the microphone and began. My name is Tommy. I served in Syria. And for the last 10 years I've been silent. Not because I was afraid, but because I thought no one would listen. I was wrong. What happened on that mission wasn't a failure. It was sabotage. A cover-up meant to protect a private agenda at the cost of human lives. The footage you are about to see was buried, not because it was false, but because it was true, and the truth scared them. The room held its breath. I was marked as expendable, he continued. They called me unstable because I saved a life, but if that's instability, then I'll wear it like a badge. I didn't come here for revenge, I came for the names on that list, the ones who never made it home, the ones they erased. He stepped back. Mila's video began to play. Silence fell, then gasps, and finally, applause. Not polite, not staged, but raw and rising, a wave of collective outrage and solidarity. The truth had landed like thunder, and nothing would be the same again. Within hours, major news outlets broadcasted the footage worldwide. Congressional hearings were demanded. Renner's name trended across platforms for all the wrong reasons. Veterans came forward. Families demanded answers. And Tommy, who had once sat alone in the back of a diner with no purpose, became a symbol, not of war but of redemption. Days later, Tommy stood once more outside the Montana cabin. This time, it wasn't just a quiet retreat. It had become a national refuge. New volunteers arrived weekly. Calvin had taken over the workshop. Julio started running group talks. The library had tripled in size, and every night more and more people gathered by the fire. Keanu joined him with a quiet smile. They're calling it the Tommy Reeves Center now. Tommy chuckled, shaking his head. I didn't do all this. No, Keanu agreed. But you lit the match. And sometimes, that's all the world needs. The flames danced in the distance as laughter echoed in the trees. Men and women who once carried nothing but scars now held hammers, pens, and new dreams. The past hadn't vanished. But it had lost its grip. Tommy took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs, not with pain, but with peace. The kind he hadn't known in years. The war wasn't over. Not out there, not in here, but now. He wasn't fighting alone.